On October 22nd, 1764, near a small town in India called Buxar, a battle was fought. Now, this wasn't just some fight over a piece of land. No, this was a battle that would end up deciding the entire political future of the subcontinent. So let's break down exactly why this single day totally reshaped history and really set the stage for 2 centuries of British rule. You've probably heard all about the Battle of Plassey, right? That it was the big start of British dominance in India. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? The idea we're digging into here is that, yeah, Plassey might have unlocked the door, but it was the Battle of Buxar that decisively and literally put the British on the throne. So to really get why Buxar was such a game changer, we've got to rewind the clock a little bit. The Battle of Plassey back in 1757 didn't create a stable situation, not at all. It created a really shaky setup, one built on a foundation of betrayal and, well, puppet rulers. Okay, so after Plassey, the British installed this guy, Mir Jafar, as the Nawab, or the ruler of Bengal. But here's the catch. He wasn't really in charge. He was a puppet, plain and simple. And the British East India Company, they were the ones pulling all the strings, constantly demanding just insane amounts of money, gifts, political favors, you name it. This pressure basically bankrupted him. So what was the British solution? Pretty simple, actually. Just get a new puppet. So, in 1760, they boot out Mir Jafar and replace him with his own son-in-law, Mir Qasim. They figured it would be more of the same, but they had completely fundamentally misjudged their man. Mir Qasim was not going to be anybody's puppet. And this contrast, right here, gets to the absolute core of the problem for the British. Where Mir Jafar had been, pretty compliant, Mir Qasim was ambitious and fiercely independent. He saw himself as a real ruler, not some pawn in their game. This difference alone put them on a collision course. And listen, Mir Qasim didn't just think differently, he acted on it. He took these really clear, strategic steps to build up his own power. First, he moves his capital away from British influence, all the way to Munro. Smart. Then he starts to rebuild and modernize his army, training them along European lines. He wasn't just playing the part of a Nawab, he was actively trying to take back real control of his kingdom. So you can feel the tension was already sky high, but one specific issue just pushed everything over the edge into open war. And like so many conflicts throughout history, you know what it came down to? Money. The British had this amazing deal for themselves, duty-free trade, but they were abusing it for their own private profits, giving them this massive, totally unfair advantage. Mir Qasim looked at this and asked a very logical, very fair question. Wait a minute. If the British don't have to pay taxes on their trade, why should my own merchants? Why are my people at a disadvantage in their own country? His solution was as brilliant as it was bold. Instead of trying to force the British to pay up, he just leveled the entire playing field. Boom. He abolished all internal trade duties for everybody, Indian and British. This one move made the company absolutely furious because it wiped out their special economic advantage overnight. War was no longer a maybe, it was inevitable. Now, after a few early defeats, Mir Qasim was forced to flee. But, and this is a huge but, he didn't just give up. Nope. Instead, he goes out and forges this massive coalition, an unprecedented alliance of Indian powers, all determined to push the British out. This wasn't just another little regional fight. This was shaping up to be a major showdown. And just look who he brought together. Of course, you have Mir Qasim, the exiled Nawab of Bengal. He's joined by Shuja-ud-Daulah, the powerful Nawab from the neighboring state of Allahabad. And most importantly, Shah Alam II, the Mughal emperor himself, the symbolic ruler of all of India. This was a first. The British were now facing the combined strength of 3 major Indian powers. I mean, look at these numbers on the battlefield. They're just staggering. The Indian alliance had something like 40,000 troops. The British, led by Major Hector Munro, had just over 7,000. On paper, this should have been a walk in the park for the alliance. But, as we all know, battles aren't won on paper. The British forces, even though they were small, were incredibly disciplined and had way better artillery and tactics. On the other side, the huge Indian army was a mess. They had poor coordination between the different groups and just a real lack of unified leadership. So that combination of British efficiency and Indian disunity, it led to a shockingly decisive victory for the smaller army. The defeat was total, an absolute rout. The Indian leaders surrendered, And believe it or not, what happened after the battle was even more important than the fighting itself. The consequences were all laid out in one single world-changing document, the Treaty of Allahabad. The year was 1765. This is a date you really need to remember. It's the exact moment the British East India Company's power flipped a switch, from being just commercial and influential to being truly administrative and, well, in charge. So, what did this treaty actually do? It granted the company something called Diwani Rights. Sounds fancy, but what it means is simple. It was the legal right given by the Mughal emperor for this private company to collect all the taxes from Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa, which just happened to be the richest provinces in all of India. And right there, that's how everything changed. Diwani gave the British 3 huge pillars of power. Number 1, money, direct control over a ton of revenue. Number 2, an army, which they could now easily pay for with all that money. And number 3, authority, the legal stamp of approval from the Mughal emperor himself. They weren't just treaters anymore, they were the government. Okay, so this brings us right back to our main question. Why was Buxar and not Plassey the really decisive battle? Well, the key is to look at what the British actually got from each victory. This table just lays it out perfectly. Plassey was a victory won through secrets and betrayal. Buxar was a straight-up military win. At Plassey, they beat a single Nawab. At Buxar, they defeated a grand alliance that included the Mughal emperor. And the outcome? Plassey gave them influence. Buxar gave them actual administrative control, the right to rule and tax. You see the difference. Plassey was the beginning, but Buxar was the consolidation of an empire. And the long-term impact was just immense. The company, now the official tax collector, began this systematic economic drain of India's wealth. Other Indian rulers saw what happened to the Grand Alliance and became either dependent on or terrified of British power. And with all that money from Bengal, British expansion across the rest of India just hit the accelerator. When you boil it all down, the Battle of Buxar is the exact moment the British East India Company finished its transformation. It shed that old skin of being a company of merchants and put on the mantle of a nation of rulers. Which brings us right back to where we started. Look, the Battle of Plassey was definitely important, no doubt about it. It got the British a foothold. But it was the decisive military and political victory at Buxar that truly cemented their power. It gave them the legal and the financial tools they needed to build an empire. So I'll leave you with this final kind of sobering thought. After Buxar, the British had legitimacy from the emperor himself, a nearly bottomless pit of money, and a military force that had proven itself against incredible odds. The question was no longer if they would expand, but really, what or who could possibly stop them?